So I'm so happy to say that I'm finally at the end of my year 1 of foundation training, and although it's been a very difficult year, it's also been one of the most incredible years of my life. Exactly 1 year ago today, I actually graduated from medical school, and in exactly 1 year from now, I'll actually be finishing off all of my foundation training and hopefully be starting my specialty training later on. So really in this video, I want to sit down here with you guys and just have a bit of a moment of reflection over how the last year has been for me as a foundation year 1 doctor. But before we do that, what is going on, guys? My name is Kenji and welcome back to my channel. Hopefully it's not the first time you're watching one of my videos, but just in case it is, I'm a doctor working in London. And guys, I've got my coffee right over here. As I said, it's going to be a very nice chilled video reflecting on my entire experience, starting off exactly 1 year ago today where I finished medical school. So if you guys don't know, I actually went to King's College London Medical School, and that graduation day was one of the most amazing days of my life, hands down. So if you haven't seen my graduation vlog, I'll leave a link up somewhere there, but please go make sure you check that out before watching this video. One of the best experiences of my life. That still is to this day just a memory that I keep in my mind and just rehearse and sort of go through every single time I find myself finding my job as a doctor difficult. After graduating, we only had about maybe 3 or 4 weeks before we actually started our jobs working as a doctor, and trust me when I say I enjoyed that time, that holiday, to my absolute fullest. I actually moved into my new apartment, so it's a super exciting time for me because I actually was leaving the sort of accommodation that I was given as a medical student and moved into my first ever apartment by myself. Such an exciting period of time, and again, I have a full entire video of my apartment. I'll link up there, but such an exciting period of my life. After moving into my new apartment, I then went on to Turkey, and I fully enjoyed that holiday. What's really interesting is that when you have a holiday where you've just sort of wrapped up 8 years of education, if I include my last degree before that and 5 years medicine, that holiday was really representing the last 8 years of medical school. So I had a lot to celebrate for. As well as that, at the back of my mind, I knew that in 1 week's time, I'll be starting my first job as a doctor. I'll be starting working weekends, working on calls, being super stressed. So whilst I was there sunbathing in the Turkish sun, I knew in the back of my mind, this is going to be probably the last holiday, or definitely the last holiday without loads of responsibility. So I really enjoyed my time. But moving on from the holiday, I then went back to London into my apartment, and I actually went back to the hospital that I was at when I graduated from my final year of medical school. It's really weird because 4 weeks prior to that, I was there as a final year medical student, and 4 weeks later, I was coming back as this new doctor for my induction period. Very strange period of time. Basically, what the induction period is when you start your work as a junior doctor, as an F1, before you actually take over the role of a doctor in that job that you're starting off with, you actually have around 1.5 to 2 weeks of shadowing. And essentially during that shadowing period, you're assigned to the doctor whose job that you'll be taking when they move on in August. So for me in particular, I was on paediatrics. So I was assigned with an F1 doctor who will be soon moving to F2 training, and she had her final rotation in paediatrics. So I got to just shadow her. Of course, I was still a fully fledged doctor. I could prescribe medications, I could see patients, but I didn't have that job necessarily. So I was kind of like a spare member of the team. But it was actually a really good period of time because you get to learn all of the things you'll be doing when you actually start that job, how the ward round works. You get to meet the whole entire team. You get to learn how the computers work and all those, IT things. So it was actually a really valuable time. I was so excited to be like, I'm here now. I'm prescribing medications for the first time. I'm working as a doctor for the first time. That was also super cool. As well as all of the sort of work related stuff. During the induction period, I also got to meet all of my F1 colleagues. So that was really exciting. We went for some drinks. We, were socializing. It kind of felt like you're back in medical school again for Freshers Week, but it was really good experience just to meet everyone and socialize and make friends. And again, that was one of the best weeks that I had of my career so far. What I also really loved during that time was going to do all of the sort of new induction things that you do at a new hospital. So picking up my brand new hospital ID that said, Dr. Kenji on it. Also picking up my brand new scrubs from the hospital, and all of those sort of admin things all kind of came together to be such an enjoyable experience. And I also have my first day as a doctor, or first week as a doctor vlog, which I will link up there for you guys to go and check out. I actually remember the final weekend before starting my proper job as a doctor. I remember just being so nervous, and the kind of excitement of starting just went away a little bit, and the nerves of being a full doctor actually started to kick in. And it was a really nerve-wracking but also exciting period before starting our job on what we call as Black Wednesday here in the UK. So Black Wednesday is a day where all junior doctors across the entire country start their job, and I believe it's the first Wednesday of that month. I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently the death rates actually go up on that day because all the new junior doctors are starting, and apparently that's when a lot of mistakes happen and a lot of patients die. I don't know if that's true, but that's just what they call it, Black Wednesday. So I remember on that Wednesday when I first started my job, I remember how, kind of nervous I was. I was actually in the pediatric assessment unit. So that's the emergency emergency department for pediatrics on my hospital. As I mentioned, I was doing pediatrics as my first specialty. Even prescribing something like paracetamol for the first time, I remember being so nervous and being like, am I getting the dose right? Am I, doing everything correctly? Small things like that, like literally just prescribing paracetamol or antibiotics. That was just so nerve-wracking, but again, such an enjoyable day. And I remember that first day of being a doctor, I just learned so much, and that whole entire experience it is just a very strong memory that I have in my mind. So I want to take a very quick break to thank Picmonic, who are kindly sponsoring the video. If you guys have been watching my channel for a while now, you know that Picmonic is the #1 way that I revised during medical school and also today on my job as a doctor. What I love about Picmonic is that unlike other resources that just give you all of the information and expect you to learn it, what Picmonic does is actually really unique. What they do is they actually give you a picture, a mnemonic, and a storyline that makes memorizing new content super easy. I'll never forget the day in medical school where I literally spent 5 minutes watching a video about how to assess for the signs of compartment syndrome. And even till this day, 4 years later, when I'm working in the A&E department, I know exactly how to assess for that because I invested a few minutes to actually watch that Picmonic. And it's that unique ability to tie in a storyline as well as a mnemonic that makes learning new content and memorizing it for the long run so much easier. So here is a quick example of the compartment syndrome Picmonic.
Here we learn about compartment syndrome assessment. Assess man disguised as compartments man. He's been shot with a trauma spike, representing that trauma or injury to tissues can cause compartment syndrome.
What else I love about Picmonic is that they actually have daily quizzes to make sure that you're testing your memory on a constant basis and therefore applying active recall to help you learn new content. If you also want to add extra information to that particular Picmonic, maybe from your own research or from your lecture slides, then you're actually able to edit the Picmonic so that when you come back later at a different point to learn the content, all of the information that you want to know is in one given place. All of the content on Picmonic is always kept up to date with students across the entire world able to add to the Picmonic database, which is also superimposed by the Picmonic experts. One really funny thing that Picmonic does is all of the characters across different storylines are actually related, which makes it super easy to differentiate between similar facts, but also tie in all of the information that you learned across a given topic or module. If you guys want to check out Picmonic for yourself, they actually have a free version on there, but if you decide that you really love it and want the full premium subscription, then you can click the link down below in the description to get a percentage off of the annual subscription. But that's Picmonic. Let's go ahead and get back to the rest of the video. But overall, I really enjoyed my time in pediatrics. I really loved the team. We had an amazing team of SHOs, registrars, and consultants who were very supportive. I loved talking to kids and helping out kids and talking to their parents. Overall, pediatrics was one of my favorite placements of all time so far as working as a doctor, and also was a really nice job to start on because in pediatrics, there's a lot of senior support, because they're children, because, in medical school, you don't actually get that much time practicing with children. So overall, it was a really good job to start with because it kind of eased me into the role as a doctor. It eased me into my first day, my first weeks practicing medicine. It gives you time to learn how the computers work, to learn how your, the drug charts work in your hospital, just to learn how the systems work in your hospital so that I wasn't immediately flung into medicine and just being super stressed. So yeah, my first few weeks of being a doctor, absolutely phenomenal, partially due to the choice of being in pediatrics. However, unfortunately, the fun and enjoyment of being a doctor and working in pediatrics just slowly went away, not because of pediatrics, but actually because I started to do a lot of work as a locum doctor. Now, I remember maybe around October or November time, 2 to 3 months of being in pediatrics, I actually started doing so many locums. I was probably doing at least 1 to 2 locums a week, sometimes doing 6 days straight because I'd locum on that Saturday. And yeah, really averaging probably, 55 to 65 hours per week, which was so tiring and so stressful. The money was good though. I was probably making between £4,000 to £5,000 a month from my main salary, but also my locum salary. And going from a medical student to earning that much as a doctor was definitely an enjoyable experience, but it also had its toll on my happiness and enjoyment of medicine. I never actually told anyone why I decided to locum so much. It wasn't because I'm greedy. It wasn't because I love the money. Of course, the money is great. But the reason why I locumed and worked so hard during that time, and even till now, is because during that time, I actually made my biggest investment I ever had in my whole entire life, and I needed a lot of money to fund that investment. So yeah, I pretty much needed a lot of money in a short space of time, which meant that I had to ramp up my hours for locuming and earning money on the side in addition to my main income. But eventually I did burn out, unfortunately. And again, I'll link a video here talking about why I decided to pause at locuming during that time in particular. So then we moved on to December 2022, and that's when I actually rotated to my next rotation, which was on stroke geriatrics. And this is when things got quite dark for me, unfortunately. Essentially, the sort of burnout that I experienced towards the end of pediatrics because of locuming so much actually carried on to my stroke medicine rotation. I never really had a break between pediatrics and stroke. I immediately went into it, locuming. I remember my first ever day being on the stroke ward. It was a huge jump, I went from pediatrics, being very sheltered, having lots of senior support, to literally doing ward rounds myself in stroke medicine with new patients in a new specialty that I've never done before. So it was actually really, really stressful. And I remember that day being super stressed on the ward, and I had to actually go to the pediatric A&E department at 5 p.m. to do another locum shift up until 9:30 p.m. So yeah, I'm sure you can imagine I was super burnt out, I was super tired, and I was also super nervous to be starting a new rotation, a new specialty in adult medicine, where I was also very independent as a doctor, which I never really had before working in pediatrics. So during that time, especially during my first week of working stroke medicine, I remember feeling like such a zombie. I literally went from 0 to 100. And the thing about when you're rotating specialties in medicine, so when you finish, let's say pediatrics, moving on to stroke medicine, there is no induction period. There's no rest period. You literally go from one rotation and the next day you start your next rotation. There's no introduction to the specialty. There's no extra training. There's no explanation of how the ward works and who the consultants are. And, this is bay 1 of the patient bays. This is bay 2 of the patient bays. You don't get someone showing you around the ward. This is literally your first day being on a different part of the hospital in a different specialty. And immediately you show up at 9 a.m. and you start the ward round either by yourself or with the consultants at 9 a.m., which is super stressful. But I didn't actually realize it was going to be that big of a difference, really. Because in actual fact, the induction that you get when you start a specialty is normally 2 to 3 weeks after you've actually already started, which is super, super weird. And to me, it doesn't really make any sense, really. Day 1, 9 a.m., you show up, you start. Hi, my name is Kenji. Hello, everyone. Okay, cool. The ward round starts. That's just how it works. Very, very weird and challenging for me to actually do my job. So if you're someone who's starting off in more of a supernumerary job role, so let's say, for example, you're working in psychiatry, or you're starting off in pediatrics like me, or in a very niche specialty, then that is one thing to bear in mind. It will be a jump from when you move from, the supernumerary specialty to then an independent specialty. So that is just something to think about. And I guess, like I said, the good thing about having peds first is that you do get more of an introduction into being a doctor. But when you then move on to the next specialty, there will be a jump and you will have to play catch up sometimes. So even small things like managing electrolyte imbalances, a patient comes, their blood results come back and they're, let's say, hypokalemic, even small stuff like that, which to me now would be so second nature, would be so obvious. Even things like that would be really stressful for me. And it really took me quite a bit of time to get a grip with how children are different from adults and how to actually manage these things on a ward. I know it's very obvious to me now, but on your first day working in, new stroke specialty, you have 20 jobs on your to-do list and, 10 of them are managing different electrolyte imbalances. It was just a lot to handle. And yeah, the reason being is because of the differences between kids and adults. When I was on the child ward, we never really had electrolyte imbalances in kids, or we rarely did. In medical school, of course, if someone is hypokalemic, of course, you just give them a bit of potassium. But the questions were like, what potassium do you give them? What potassium do we have at this hospital? How much do you give them? How long for? Just these really, stupid questions or things that were just, I just had no idea about. And also, the ward was just so busy. The nurses were constantly coming up to me with questions that I had no idea what the answers were. And the dietitians would come and ask me questions. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm a new F1. This is my first year on this, the stroke specialty. It wasn't very, very easy to put things that way. As well as stroke just being a very busy specialty in general in my hospital, it was also my first time doing on-call shifts and working weekends. So because I was in pediatrics and because that is a very supernumerary role, I had no on-calls, I had no weekends, I had no night shifts. And it wasn't really that working on-calls was something that I was scared of. And that's just the anticipation of not knowing what I don't know is what actually led to me being quite stressed out and quite worried for my first few on-call shifts. When you're on-call as well, you normally work from 9 a.m. to 9:30 p.m., which means that I often got home at 10 o'clock or 10:30 p.m. and meaning that I have to actually go back to the ward the next morning to start at 9 a.m. So also that experience of working long shifts for the first time ever. This was quite tiring for me as well. Not to scare you guys, but to tell you a bit of a story, I remember my first ever day working on call on a weekend. This was a Saturday. It was my first Saturday ever working as a doctor. And during that Saturday, I was on a random ward, just doing some jobs that I was told to do. I was literally sat there. I had a consultant with me as well. I was getting on with the jobs I was supposed to be doing, and this nurse ran out of the this patient bay and was like, oh my God, this patient is not responding. And they pulled that sort of emergency alarm. And if you've been on a ward, I'm sure you know how loud that alarm is. But yeah, they pulled the alarm, and me and the consultant immediately ran over to find out what was going on. We looked at the patient, assessed the patient very briefly, and it was obvious that the patient was actually going into cardiac arrest. Their heart had completely stopped. And the consultant was basically like, okay, Kenji, start CPR. I'm going to go ahead and read the patient notes to find out what's going on. So the consultant disappeared to the next room to read this patient's notes. And I was left there by myself as a first year doctor, literally being in stroke specialty. So in total, working as a doctor for the last 5 months. And I remember being like, oh my God, I'm actually going to start CPR on this patient for the first time ever by myself. I ended up doing CPR for probably about 5 minutes until the rest of the cardiac arrest team arrived. And by the time the cardiac arrest team arrived, I had a huge cramp on my tricep. My whole body was so tired and so sore. I didn't actually realize how difficult it is to give CPR to someone. The patient's ribs like had cracked beneath me, like doing CPR. Like I could literally feel the ribs collapsing and cracking. Yeah, it just wasn't a very enjoyable experience. Like I was super happy to have helped that patient, but afterwards I was like, pretty traumatized, if I'm honest with you guys. And immediately after that, the consultant was like, okay, good job, Kenji, let's go back and carry on with what we're doing before. Like there was no, Kenji, take 10 minutes to go and relax and get your head together, get your mind right. It was literally job done. The cardiac arrest team will, take over from you. Don't worry about them. Come back and let's get back to work. And that was a really difficult weekend. And my first weekend ever on call just didn't go very, very well. But yeah, let me not get too cynical here, guys. Things did get brighter. Things did get a lot better. After a couple of weeks of working on the ward, I ended up, getting to know the team really, really well. And my team on stroke were probably my favorite team that I ever had so far working as a doctor. I got to know the consultants. They were really, really helpful. I also just felt a lot more confident. Having been on the ward for, let's say, 2 months, I felt like I knew how the ward works. I knew a lot more about stroke. I knew how to manage these general medical things that come up on a general medical ward. I felt a lot more, like I said, confident and competent in what I was doing as a doctor. And generally, my work-life balance started to improve because I got used to the specialty. I got used to the on-calls, working late, working weekends. I somehow just, managed to, just put all of that together, to actually find a work-life balance. I even went to Italy in January, which was actually super lovely. But eventually, my time in stroke medicine was over. It was time to say goodbye to stroke. And on my last day, I'm not going to lie to you, I was quite happy to move on. I felt like I had I was ready to, experience a different specialty. However, it was bittersweet because I learned so much on stroke. It made me, a much better doctor. But I was happy to then move on to my next specialty, which was psychiatry. So psychiatry was just my last job that I have literally just finished now as an FY1 doctor, and it actually was one of the best specialties that I've done, hands down, overall. For multiple reasons, I'll leave a whole entire video up there, again, reviewing my time in psychiatry, but I essentially spent 4 months in old age psychiatry on an inpatient ward, looking after elderly people, elderly females, actually, only females, with severe mental health illnesses. But overall, I really, really enjoyed my time in psychiatry. It was 9 to 5. Again, I was going back to 9 to 5. There was no weekend work. There was no night shifts. There was no on-calls. So generally, I felt like I got my energy back in psychiatry. I had time for my friends, for my family, to go to the gym. I did a bit of traveling as well. I literally just had enough time to actually enjoy my time outside of medicine. And a common complaint that a lot of doctors say about psychiatry is that it's quite boring. But for me personally, the benefits of being in psychiatry definitely outweighed the kind of cons of being in psychiatry. Yes, I was a lot less busy than I was in medicine. Yes, I wasn't giving CPR and saving lives on a daily basis. Yes, my time wasn't, the most maybe exciting. However, as I said, for me particularly, I felt like just working 9 to 5 over the whole entire summer was just a nice way to enjoy summer. I always finished at 5 p.m. I had teaching every Tuesday, which I can do from home. Every Thursday, we had this balance group, which meant that I could again finish a little bit earlier. And just overall, my general enjoyment and happiness of life just went up being in psychiatry. And because of this, I was actually able to locum a lot more in pediatrics. Because I was only working 9 to 5, because I felt like my day job wasn't entirely stressful, it meant that I was doing a lot of locums in pediatrics. I was probably locuming on average 2 to 3 days a week in the evenings in pediatrics. pediatrics. But for me personally, that gave me the perfect balance between, you know, my physical health medicine and my mental health medicine. And although a lot of my colleagues found, you know, mental health boring, I certainly didn't. And again, it meant that I would spend time in the pediatric A&E department in the evenings, making up for that, quote unquote, you know, boring or less busy aspects of medicine. But overall, yeah, really enjoyed psychiatry. I had a great summer, I'm not gonna lie to you, and here we are right at the end of psychiatry. So what is next? That is a big question, isn't it? Well, I still have my foundation year 2 to go. As I mentioned to you guys, I have 1 year left of my foundation training before eventually moving on. And I actually was supposed to be starting my next rotation or my next job in the A&E department. I was supposed to be on emergency medicine for the next 4 months. However, guys, I actually traded and swapped my emergency medicine specialty for psychiatry again. So for the next 4 months, I'm going to be back in psychiatry. However, this time, rather than being on an inpatient ward, I'll actually be in an outpatient setting, but again, in old age psychiatry. This was actually a really difficult decision for me. During medical school, doing emergency medicine was the best specialty that I really had the most amazing time in medical school. However, there were a few reasons that led to me wanting to change to do psychiatry instead of emergency medicine. I love A&E, like I said, I really do. I think it's super interesting, but I really enjoyed my time so much in psychiatry, and I'm really not willing to compromise the quality of life that I had working in psychiatry. From what I've seen so far in emergency medicine, from what my friends have said, and also just looking at the rota for A&E, it was a very difficult rota. There was like 22 night shifts in the whole entire 4 months of working A&E. The shifts were all haphazard, like literally one day you're working from 8 till 4, the next day you're working from 2 till 10 p.m. Just very random shift patterns, and overall it just wasn't for me. And I know that now, and I'm actually quite at peace with my decision. This is probably worth having a whole entire video about my thoughts of, you know, trading A&E for psychiatry. I will talk about it in another video if you guys want me to. Leave a comment down below. Overall, I will be moving on to psychiatry again. I'm quite happy with that, and I feel quite at peace in my heart. And after the next 4 months of being in psychiatry again, I'll then be moving on to my surgical rotation, which is obstetrics and gynecology. And again, I'm actually really excited for that. I've heard that OBGYN is actually amazing at my hospital, and overall in medical school, it definitely was hands down one of the best experiences that I ever had in medical school, delivering babies and, you know, helping out with C-sections. I'm super excited for that. Then I'll be moving on to my final rotation of foundation training, which will be in the acute medical unit, and that's essentially a sort of temporary ward where very sick patients go from A&E. They go from A&E to the AMU, then AMU to a ward. So I'll be the doctor working AMU. I'm not really looking forward to that, if I'm honest with you. I know it's quite stressful. Again, it's being back in a medical job for 4 months. However, at that point in time, I'm hoping that I'll literally be looking at the finish line. Like, I think I'll be 4 months out from finishing, and although it'll be difficult, although there'll be loads of night shifts and stuff like that, I think I'll be so close to the finish line that I won't even worry about, you know, having a stressful 4 months. But yeah, in terms of what I will be doing after foundation training, honestly, I don't know, guys. At this stage, I think I probably will have to expand on this in another video, just taking you guys through all of my thoughts and my feelings right now in terms of, do I go into specialty training? Do I go into pediatric training? Do I do something completely different? If you guys want a video on that, telling you about my thoughts and feelings, about how I'm rationalizing my future, leave a comment down below. But I want to stop this video here, guys. I hope it's been enjoyable for you in some way or form. If it has, please leave a like. Make sure to subscribe with notifications on to never miss another upload. Thank you so much for watching and sitting here reflecting with me on the last 1 year of working as a doctor, and I'll see you guys on the next one.